Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back. It's that time of week again. Everybody's favorite video, the MLB Power Rankings here on the channel. Before I jump into it, I'm just going to do a quick call out to all you people watching. I'm looking at the analytics and there. 75% of the people that watch this video are not subscribed. Please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. It's helping the channel grow. This channel's slowly but surely grown into quite a community. We have a Discord that keeps things going. You can get into that in the comments below. But other than that, that's the only thing I ask. I do this every week, and I'm starting to come up with ideas for a midweek video, I think, that I'm going to start rolling out. So keep your eyes out for that and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, guys, I'm just going to jump right into it. Still at the bottom, even though they got their first win in a series against Kansas City over the weekend, they won that series, but this team still is the most atrocious team in the league. I don't care if they beat Kansas City. They got swept by the Mariners earlier in the week. They're just a disaster. I think their run differential is minus 100 or more at this point. I don't expect them to win a whole lot of series. If they're going to win, they're going to win against number 29, and it's going to be the Kansas City Royals, who did lose to them. They also lost to Baltimore earlier in the week, but they put up quite a bit of runs against Baltimore, so give a little bit more to them. I think they are overall the better team between these two. Sure, they lost a 3-game series. Had it gone 7, I think they would have came back and won the next couple. So I still am going to give the edge to the Royals here. I'm not going to get too much into it, but it was the battle of the basement this weekend. So if you're into that kind of thing, it was an exciting series to watch. Number 28, we got the Washington Nationals. 3-1 against the Cubs, so they got things kicking off early. But now they just got swept by the Arizona Diamondbacks. So this Washington team, they've been pretty inconsistent, I guess you could say. They do manage to score quite a bit of runs, but they also give up a lot. They managed to sneak a win off teams here and there. They might have a shot moving up in their division because number 27 is the free-falling Miami Marlins. 0-3 against the Braves to kick things off, and then they lost to the Cubs going 1-2. So the Marlins were having a pretty good record as of April. Talked about it in the prior videos. The record was much better than the team was playing analytically and how they looked. And it's starting to show this week with only the 1 win out of 6 games. Marlins are pretty much where we expect them to be. I'm pretty interested to see how these two teams match up against each other. Who's going to actually be worse by the end of the season? Right now, I am holding a little bit on Washington, but I don't know if we saw the Marlins being this low when the season started. But speaking of teams we did not see this low, number 26, I think a career low. They keep making more career lows, I should say. Got swept by the Angels earlier in the week, and they managed to salvage a win today, luckily, against Detroit. So going 1-2, 1-5 on the week. Just keeps getting worse for the Cardinals. I don't know what else to say. Every time I turn them on, every time I'm looking at the box score, they're losing, and they're pretty much dig a pretty big hole. They got 4 teams ahead of them now in their division that I don't know if they match up well against at all, and I do suspect they're going to end the season in last place in that division just based on how they're playing. Their pitching just needs a lot of work. Number 25, making a name for themselves this week. We got Colorado Rockies. They swept Milwaukee to start things off early in the week. Milwaukee last week, number 3, big surprise. So they swept that, and then they beat the Mets over the weekend. So 5-1 on the week. And if you based it off last week's standings, it was against 2 top row teams. Mind you, I know I've talked about a lot, 3 through whatever. A lot of controversy, and we're going to get into a lot of controversy as we start moving up on these power rankings. Trust me, my job was not easy this week, but I think for the bottom row, it's pretty much going to be across the board for most people that this is pretty much an agreement. You might have a couple teams here and there, but I think that's the bottom row. 24, Cincinnati, they went 1-2 against San Diego, and then 1-2 against the White Sox. They had a little bit of a streak going, being somewhat competitive, but I think it's come to an end. Cincinnati, they just don't have it in the tank to be able to compete against the upper teams. They got to get into a matchup with number 23, the Chicago White Sox, and they fell a little bit low, especially in the second game in the game today where they got absolutely destroyed. Chicago White Sox started to show that they have a little bit more in them. They had a winning week. They beat Minnesota, and they beat Cincinnati. So after that atrocious, 10-game losing streak, they're starting to turn things a little bit around. I don't think they're out of it. As much as they've had a terrible start to the season, this is the one division where you could go on a little bit of streak. You're going to be playing Kansas City Royals a bunch. You're going to be playing this next team a bunch. You got the Detroit Tigers, 3-0 against the Mets, 2-1 against St. Louis. So believe this or not, if you didn't know this, the Detroit Tigers have not lost a series unless it's against the American League East. That's something to write home about. And honestly, they could probably move up a little bit, but they've played a lot of AL East teams. The AL East teams are probably going to block everyone from making the playoffs unless you're a division leader. And right now, I don't know if Detroit has what it takes to win this division. When they play each other here, I think they have a little bit of advantage. Sure, can they move up a little bit? Sure, they've been playing pretty good, especially against other teams. They had a good week. Can they keep it rolling? Not so sure, but as we're talking about these teams and these two, just to talk about the American League Central a little bit more, division's wide open. When you look at the whole league as a whole, maybe not open for these two teams to be too competitive, but one of these teams has got to get out of the division. Who's it going to be? Number 21, moving on up a couple of spots. We got San Francisco Giants, winning week for them, 2-1 against Houston, 2-1 against the Brewers over the weekend. So again, another team that was in the National League West that beat two teams that were in the top row. So a little bit of a shock here. Maybe I was hurting on these worst teams in this West division in the National League. Maybe I need to give the National League West a little bit more credit going forward because they seem to be matching up against some of these other teams fairly well. In San Francisco, while I don't see them making steps in the direction of being a playoff team, they're going to be competitive and they might be hovering around 500 based on what I've seen. So we might see them start to edge up. I don't think they can fall too much further. I think I had them in the bottom row at one point. They were looking really rough, but they're starting to turn things around at least a little bit. Be exciting to see how they turn it up. Number 20, we got the Cleveland Guardians, 1-2 against the Yankees, and then 2-1 against Minnesota. So a 500 week. 500 is not going to be enough to be a playoff team. So now you see three central teams in this outside looking in kind of row. They did manage to maintain some pace against the Minnesota Twins, which is the team that is by far right now the favorite to win this division. And if they're going to have a shot at it, they got to win the series against the Twins, and they did that. Mind you, they got to start winning against other teams. They lost to the Yankees, another team that's kind of been struggling. They're going to be losing a lot to these middling rows that we've seen over the course of the season so far. So do I see them being able to consistently beat the Twins? Not a chance. So I still have them pretty far out of a playoff spot. Number 19, Seattle Mariners. They went 3-0 against Oakland, so they started things off right. They're playing Oakland. They got to win. They sweep. And then they go into Houston and they win the series there, 2-1. So Seattle had a good week, a 5-1 week, but they have a lot of ground to make up. They're in a tough division and in a tough conference. And when we're starting to look at how stacked the American League East is, how stacked the American League West tends to be, you got to beat the teams that you match up pretty decently in the Central. So when we start seeing them play teams in the Central, they've got to win those series. They got to win series against the teams ahead of them. Right now, they're not doing that. And I don't know if they match up perfectly well against those teams. So right now I have them right here in the second bottom row, but they can go on a run and they got to play their division strong. And there's going to be lots of those games, so keep your eye on that. Number 18, we got the Pittsburgh Pirates. Coming into this week, I took a lot of heat last week in the comments about having the Pirates only get 16. They were in first in the National League. I made a point of saying that they hadn't really been tested yet. They hadn't really played a whole lot of teams above 500. And then I said, let's see how they do this week. And sure enough, they get swept in both series. So they're not ready yet. They're not ready to be in the conversation, in my opinion, for a playoff team. Sure, right now they're technically in first in the division. I think it's only a matter of time before they slowly fall out of that. Sure, they're going to be a lot more competitive than a Pirates team we've seen in a long time. But I just don't see it yet. I don't know if they can put it together. And this week kind of spoke to what I was talking about. Just don't think they have it yet. Sure, they're going to be competitive, and that's what the Pirates have wanted for a number of seasons. They've sat in the bottom row for a number of seasons, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll see how they play. They got a couple more important series coming up. We'll see how those go. Number 17, got the Arizona Diamondbacks. 1-1 against Texas, and they swept Washington. Arizona is one of those teams that I continually put a little bit lower than I think most people would put them. I just have trouble seeing them being able to squeak into the playoffs. It'll take them being the second wild card, in my opinion. The two top spots in this division should be pretty secured by the two teams that are ahead of them here. They have a strong top of the rotation. Zach Gallen, Merrill have been lights out. Zach Gallen on his way for Cy Young right now, but it's a five pitcher rotation, and right now I don't see Arizona being able to consistently do it. And if they lose one of these pitchers, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. So right now I do think they're going to be competitive. This is like 500 territory, above 500, but it's outside of the playoffs. Keep an eye on them though. I might be one of those teams like a couple of years ago I was like with the Giants that I'm just not on board with just quite yet. Number 16, we got the Philadelphia Phillies, just continuing to go rough. They get swept by the Dodgers early, and it wasn't just a regular sweep. They got absolutely demolished. So that was a little rough. Bryce Harper was coming back. Supposed to be a good thing, but it didn't really work out for them. And then over the weekend, they lose to Boston, managing to salvage the week by picking up a win today. But a lot of work to do with the Philadelphia Phillies. Lucky for them, I do think that second wildcard spot in the National League is completely up for grabs, and all it takes is going on a little bit of a streak here, and they've had it a little tough early. I'm not ready to count them out. World Series they made it to last year. They're a little bit further out now, but they're quite within striking distance. Number 15, I don't think we would have thought this was going to be the case coming into the week. They beat the Guardians 2-1, and then today was a little rough, and they lost the series to Tampa. They were up 6-0 with Garrett Cole on the mound, and they could not close it out. It would have been a monster series win in a division where every game's going to count. And right now, they're sitting last place in the American League East, and I think realistically they deserve to be there based on they're just suffering a lot of injuries. The team's not coming together quite the way they want. The depth isn't there because of the injuries. The rotation's not there because of the injuries. The Yankees, they're behind the 8 ball right now. Of course, striking distance. I'm not going to count them out. They're the Yankees. They got a good team. They got some good players. They got some solid all-around talent. Right now, it's not looking great for them. Number 14, we got the Chicago Cubs. 1-3 against Washington. So they started the week pretty rough. Going into Washington division, that's kind of up for grabs. And I still think they have a really good shot at winning this division. They lose to Washington in a 4-game set. I don't like to see that. That's a series that they really need to pick up some wins on. But then they come back and they beat Miami again, 2-1. So they didn't pick up a whole lot of wins this week in 7 games. They got 3 wins against 2 teams that are down here in the bottom row. If that's going to be how they're going to be playing going forward, they're not going to hold on to this spot for very long. They'll slowly fall back down. But right now, I do think they're the number 1 contender to fight for the top of that division. Number 13. Making some moves this week. We got the LA Angels. They swept the Cardinals early, so really helped me shape how the Cardinals are looking. And the Angels' offense seems to be there. The pitching is way a concern, and we saw it especially today against Texas, where they lost the series today on Sunday in the rubber match. Big concern there. Right now, they're in the playoff hunt. Probably the most we can say about the Angels going deep into the season, that normally they're not very far up in this rankings this far into the season. So they got at least that going for them. Ohtani continues to be MVP. Trout, of course, playing great. So the Angels are in it. I don't know if they have the pitching to be able to get over that hump, but they might be able to sneak into a wild card spot while they can beat up on some of these other teams along the way. Right now, I do have them slightly on the outside looking in. And that's because I got Houston at number 12. This is a big drop. I think I finally came to agreement that they are no longer top row, locked to make the playoffs. Houston did not have the greatest of weeks. They lost to San Francisco early in the week, taking 1 game there. And then they lost to the Mariners over the weekend, only taking 1 game there. Big concern right now with the Astros is their rotation. They got 3 of their main starters who are out right now with McCullers, Garcia, Urquidy. And that was a big part of what made Houston so strong, in my opinion. And those guys are out, one of them out for the season. And I think it's Garcia who has the Tommy John. But Yeah, their offense has dried up too. Jose Abreu not been great, but right now I do kind of put them in fighting for that last playoff spot. You got Houston, you got Yankees, you got Angels, probably all trying to duke it out for that spot. I don't know if Houston can do it. We might slowly see them fall down the rankings just because these injuries they're killing them, much like the Yankees are. Number 11. 0-3 against Detroit, 1-2 against Colorado. Probably could argue that it should be a little bit lower, but I think it's just been a rough, slow start for this team. They've had an ugly couple of weeks. I had them in the top row for a number of weeks there. The rotations should be better. Scherzer was on that 10-game suspension. They were lacking Verlander, and their bats, well, Alonso got off to such a hot start at the bat. His batting average is way down. Lindor's is way down. You want to see some offense out of this team, and right now you're not seeing it, and it was an atrocious week. They stole a win off Atlanta on Monday while they wrapped up the series. They really, really needed it, but they need a little bit more from this team. Otherwise, they're another one of those teams that are slowly falling. You're going to see in this top 10, it's been a cluster. It's been a lot of moving parts this week. If you compare this to last week, it's quite the biggest change I've probably done in a while. And I couldn't argue, I didn't know what else to do here because I think there's a lot of shuffle. A lot of teams are starting to show their true colors, and these two being the main culprits in that situation. Number 10, making a big drop from number 3 last week. We got the Milwaukee Brewers 0-3 against 0-3 against Colorado to start the week. Just real bad. And then they managed to sneak a win today against San Francisco. They had been on a 7-game losing streak in a spot where I said they were pretty much cruising their way to win this division. Milwaukee struggled. They're struggling this week. Lucky for them, the Pirates also went on a 7-game losing streak. I think it's up to 8 now. So Milwaukee has a little bit of an edge over them, in my opinion, but Cubs are not too far behind, and they free fall down this rankings. A lot of the American League teams showing that to me. They're much stronger than the National League teams, and you saw it with these two teams coming out of the top row because I just don't give them the credit anymore. Number 9, probably the biggest climber of the week. We got the Boston Red Sox, and that all started with an amazing series they played against the Blue Jays where they swept them 4-0. That series could have easily been 2-2. There was both games where they had huge comebacks late in the games. And then they won a big series against the Phillies. So if we look over the past month or so with Boston, they beat the Phillies, they swept the Jays, they beat the Angels, they beat the Astros. They've just been beating these teams, and I could no longer keep them low. As much as I'm still not so sure that they're competitive enough to be in the playoffs, I have to give them credit now to be a top 10 team because they just keep winning, and their offense seems to be smashing the ball. And the pitching somehow is getting it done for them. Can they keep it up? I'm not sure. I want to see how they play again against the Blue Jays. Like I said, could have been 2-2 easily. How are they going to play against Baltimore? They've already lost both series against those guys. And Tampa, they haven't really seen much of them yet. We'll see how that goes. But right now, I'm giving Boston as much credit as I can. And that brings us to number 8, the Baltimore Orioles. They had a good week. They got to be pretty happy. Even though it was 500, they went 2-1 against Kansas City. They looked all right. They won the one game by 1 run. They lost the other game by 1 run. And then they smashed the other game. Got to be pretty excited with a win there. They kept it rolling, kept doing what I'm saying. And then they played Atlanta this weekend, and they played Atlanta super tough. It could have easily went the other way with the Orioles. Could have swept the series. It was that close. But they lost the series 1-2. But I give the Orioles a lot of credit here. Their bullpen has been closing out games. Their offense has been putting up runs. Just got to keep moving them up. I'm excited to see when they finally play the Blue Jays, how those two teams are going to match up because they have matched up pretty intensely over the past few years. It's going to be cool how they do. Number 7, we got the Minnesota Twins. 1-2 against the White Sox, 1-2 against Cleveland. Now, this was a chance for Minnesota to really make a name for themselves. As much as I wanted to say, man, this team's number 3 now, because they're pretty much a lock to win this division, they blew it this week. They lost to the Guardians. They lost to the White Sox, two teams that I guess are in theory in the race still. They weren't able to close the door. Had they swept one of those teams, I had really much would have put the Twins higher, but I couldn't. They just lost two very important series. At this time, I do think their chance to make the playoffs is higher than these two, but right now I have them all making the playoffs, so there's that. Number 6, moving up a bunch of spots, LA Dodgers 3-0 against Philly. 1-1 against San Diego, so they're the Sunday nighter today, and they're playing San Diego. Dodgers putting all the rough things I've been saying to them to rest. They absolutely destroyed the Phillies. Their offense is starting to roll. Their pitching is starting to be all right, and they're pretty much a big threat to be top of the division with number 5, the San Diego Padres, who went 2-1 against Cincy, and they are now 1-1. Like, they're playing tonight, like I said. Realistically, whoever wins tonight, you could swap them if the Dodgers win, whatever. I still think the Padres are a little bit ahead of the Dodgers. I think I would bet my money on them winning the division over the Dodgers, but they're neck and neck, and they're going to be playing each other so well this year. It's going to be fun to watch. Number 4. Now, this was tough. So I had a hell of a time figuring out who I was going to put 3, 4, and so on. The reason I put 4 is the way the Jays bounced back from that sweep against Boston. The offense had been very good in that series against Boston. They've been pretty much on fire. I really love this lineup as a Jays fan. Maybe a little bit biased, but I really do think this team matches up well against everybody. And they showed it bouncing back after that series sweep. A lot of off the field talk about how this team's young, but they're not phased. They weren't phased by that sweep, and they showed it against this Pirates team that they absolutely destroyed this weekend. And I expect them to keep it rolling. I do think they're, right now, hard to say that they're not the 4th team. Number 3, I didn't know what to do. Like, Texas, 1-1 against Arizona, 2-1 against LA. They have the 2nd best run differential in the entire MLB, and they continue to roll. Their offense has been absolutely smashing. Their rotation has been pretty solid, and the fact that they don't have DeGrom right now with that elbow inflammation or whatever's going on with him, couldn't discount Texas. Right now, I think Texas is playing like a team that is destined to win this division. They're absolutely mauling, and I couldn't find an argument to put anyone else at number 3 at this point. Some people might say there's other things you can do. Realistically, you can probably swap a lot of this around, but this is how I see it. I see Texas as right now the front runner to win that division in the West. I think if you match them up against the Jays right now, they're going to beat them. I think if you match them up against some of these other teams, they're going to beat them. So right now, I got Texas at number 3. And by far the highest Texas has ever been in these power rankings. Number 2, we got Atlanta 3-0 against Miami, 2-1 against Baltimore. They continue to be top team in the National League. I don't think there's any doubt who the best team is in the National League right now. It's them. They played really tough against the Baltimore Orioles. They lost earlier in the week to the Mets on that Monday, like I talked about earlier, and then they swept Miami, a team that they should sweep. Atlanta's just going to keep playing. This is a team that you got to watch out for, and I can't argue with them going into number 1 yet because this team just continues to roll, and they made a threat of it today. But that comeback is just too hard to discount. This offense is just absolutely lights out. As much as their pitching has been a little bit over the past week or so, the offense has been unmatched, and their run differential is off the charts. Tampa Bay continues to be number 1 in my mind. They swept the Pirates early in the week and then beat the Yankees. So they're by far the best team and still on pace to be the best record in MLB history. 116 wins is in their sights, so let's keep an eye on that. Other than that, guys, there you guys have it. The power rankings for the first week of May. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with. Like I said, a lot going on this week, a lot of jumbling. And it seems like, for me, the season's still a big cloud. Like, a lot of these teams, I don't know who they are. Like Milwaukee, what's going on? Jays are up and down, up and down. Should they even be number 4? I'm not sure. I think maybe I have them too high. Like, it's tough to say. But realistically, any team from like 23 on, in my opinion, still has a shot in the playoffs. Don't think Cincinnati, while they do have a shot in that division, I'd be shocked if they made it. But who knows? It's the MLB. It's a long season. anything can happen. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate all the support that you guys give this channel. If you want to keep the conversation going, join the Discord, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you for that next video.